Good morning. I hope you are all well. Well, here I am, and I'm working on some of my main characters for the Realms of Elsewhere. Sometimes when you're doing that, you're working on really big figures. So the Realms are 9 books. Each book has a map in it of the world of the Realms of Elsewhere. So there are 32 countries in the world, and each country has people in it of one sort or another, whether they're elves, goblins, grilks, they're dragons, they're giants, or whatever they might be. And what I love doing is doing this kind of thing. Here, this is the elves and their swords, what I call elven swords. And I've got all kinds of things here just for elves. So I've got Gallimars and Loftimars and Emishmars and Thrigs, Blackthorns, Withe-smiths, Elm-smiths. Sometimes it's a response to a particular trade, but then I feel inspired to add them into the narrative. I've got Sizzle Taps and Thin Twigs and Scullions, Midgeborts and Galleon Pots, Skillamars and Canker Sizzlers. They're all cooks, those last ones. And then for makers of bows and elven archers, these families could be long bows or old bows or long eyes, bow makers and quillifors. What else have I got over here? Beam masters and crest makers, thrigs of long service, maythorn. Anyway, it goes on. So each one of these has possibility. And sometimes, I'll just show you, characters can be very characterful. So this is a boffin working with fairy people. So this is quite a big illustration, but the boffins are very important. I've got a giant here. This is a giant who saved a village from flooding by picking up the houses. He's picking up one here. So when I do how can I explain this? When I do a particular character who I've really become fond of, I will find the time to spend with them. And for me, as a visual creative as well as a writer, that means drawing them and developing them. The more I do that, it's a bit like being in their skin, actually. It's a bit like being in their skin. So today what I'm going to show you is the first stage, which is, well, how do they look? How do these people actually look? And what they do, does that fashion them? So here we've got a lady called Mrs. Mathagan, who's another boffin, and she's a hat maker. So quite clearly I just did a quick sketch, and then because they all got big hats, I started to draw, and then the drawing turned into this full-blown illustration. So that was really cool. It was simple, and maybe it doesn't sound simple, but it was simple. Just making sure that's right. The development of a character is the excitement. What would they do if, as a boffin like Mrs. Mathagan, how would she be? And because they're all quite small, they're like little miniature adults, child size, kind of a 5-year-old size height. It becomes intriguing. With the giant, get the giant back. With the giant, this is a much more serious approach to the style. I've indented the paper, so you can see there's a lot of white. Well, that's indentation, and then dragging pencils and coloured pens over, so you get the indentation starts to shine up because the the colour doesn't go into the areas that you've marked. You can see it in some of the darker areas. But I like doing that. And in doing it takes so long, so it's about, I don't know, 90 hours, 100 hours, I get to know them. And in my head, their stories start to develop. So that works really well for me. So I'm doing something in some ways quite small. I'm working on this, he's called Master Oldgrain. He's a wood harvester. But I just wanted to show, before I did him, the way I'm working in the initial way, development. So these are relatively quick ink sketches where I'm literally drawing. I don't even know where they're coming from, but I quickly draw a few lines, and then suddenly, before I know where I am, I've got somebody, a judge here, a soldier there, a fairy planter there. And it's the same with this page, where I'm creating characters in a scene at the beginning of a book. And I wanted to capture energy. So lots of energy with characters. We're going to be in a storm, and I wanted them to look like they had a lot of movement. And I just explain. I should have got this before. So this illustration eventually turns into this illustration. Just get that out of the light. There's that character. There he is. And they're in this storm. Yeah. So that's basically the process, if I want to call it a process. It's the creative journey of an illustration. But underneath that creative journey, there are the ideas. And for me, as a creative, the ideas come thick and fast. But at this stage, this is the crucial stage when I'm developing somebody who may become really important in the stories, or can do. I have the 9 books, these great adventures of the main characters, but I also am starting to really enjoy recording side stories. And if I'm filming, like today, a little short film about how I work, showing you the process from idea. So this is a bit like when you're putting a film up on YouTube or on TikTok or wherever, they take a little stamp, I don't know what they call it now, which everyone sees. And that's a bit like this, really. It's just giving an idea of a character, and in that case, what's in the film. And it's a really necessary part of my process. Some people might say, well, doesn't it take you a long time to do it like this? Well, I've just shown you that I do sketches. Really sketchy, but this one I kind of wanted to finish him off a bit more. So I've got different pens. I'm using, I've tried various pens over the years. Waterproofs, they're waterproof. But I really like these. And part of the reason is they do 0.03. And so they're not only very, very fine, they're also very reliable. And I've got hundreds of them. So what I do is begin to develop atmosphere, character within the wood. I remember the first time I came across Arthur Rackham's work. Amazing illustrator, a lot of people are very familiar with Arthur Rackham. He made a lot of stories famous for his illustrations. Like Peter Pan and Kensington Gardens, for instance. But many things, his work was phenomenal. But what I liked about his work was that you could look and see all sorts of faces and things in trees, and so I do that a lot. It's one of my things. Fair. So these things take time, but this is great. But once you've got this stage kind of sorted out, and you're looking at it and seeing how it works, and I'm thinking, what is this made of? This is like, is it rush? Is it hazel twigs? Possibly a bit of both, but probably it's going to be, the basket's going to be made of hazel. And I'm going to get a bit of colour in there. I've got these amazing, they're new to me, they're oil pencils. So they give you a different, they're slightly shiny, which is fantastic. And you can develop your illustration. So, to answer my own question, I suppose, is that why spend this amount of time on a sketch? Well, because you get inside it, you get inside the illustration, you get inside, most importantly, the character. Who is this elvish forester? He's the, I think I called him the wood harvester for Felden Forest and its reaches. And when I say in its reaches, I mean literally in its reaches. Whatever those rivers, where that forest reaches into, you'll be up and down from one place to another. You'll know all the trees by name and reputation. Oh, there you are. You go. If he sees a big tree in front of him that he's been familiar with, that he's had many lunches underneath, so knowing them so well, that he gets to talk to him, do his trees there, and get some of that there, get some of that sense that this has been a woven basket, and make it a bit darker, enrichment. So those of you out there who love illustration, want to draw, my best advice is just do it. Basically, just do it. And because thinking about it won't get it done. Just won't get it done. No matter how hard you try, the pens will not lift themselves up off the table. And no matter if you have a resistance to doing something, you should look at what is that resistance. Why am I putting it off? Why? And the odd thing is that no matter how hard it seems to be that when you stop putting it off, it goes incredibly well. And you say to yourself, what was the issue? What on earth was the issue? It was so good. I had a story evening last night with year twos, so they're only 6 years old, rising sixes, 35 of them. I didn't really have too much of an issue. I hadn't done any for a while, so that was probably the issue. Will I remember what to do, how to do it? I've got a number of instruments and things, and will they be very tired because it was late for them? They were. It was 7 o'clock, so really most of them should be in bed. And they turned up with their teddy bears and in their PJs and sat around me while I played the kora. And then I began to tell them stories. And for an hour we had a wonderful time to take children into the states of imagination, to bring them into a space of wonder is really important to me. In education these days, there is not enough of that. It's not the teacher's fault, it's the national curriculum. It's a big thing of mine. I've worked in schools for 33 years. I was there before the national curriculum was invented. And education was brighter then. It had more life to it. The children were infused. The teachers were allowed to be amazing rather than having to tick boxes. So it does annoy me. And I feel that a lot of children are suffering because of that. So I spent, I don't know, the best part of 33 years in schools teaching creativity through stories to something like, how was it, over 250,000 children. It's rather a lot, really. And I would be sitting like I am now on camera with them around me while I was doing something, and they would just be really engaged, just be engaged, and then they go off and do something amazing. Mostly because they were having a ball, an absolute ball. And that was the important thing. If they were having a ball, then they were engaged. And if they were engaged, then they were learning something subtly. Even in creativity, they were learning things like sharing, intrigue with others. You could see the children going around and looking what people were doing. These were 6-year-olds, 8-year-olds. And with teenagers, the challenges would be greater, of course, what I was asking them to do. But they would be so engaged. And teachers would say, I've never seen work like this before. They are so buzzy. And it's that buzziness, that wonderful buzziness, that makes the big difference. Yeah, it's really important. Mega important. So, it's like bringing the studio into the classroom. And it's what I'm doing here. I'm bringing the studio into your house, to your moment, your wherever. Maybe you're having a cup of tea. Or not. And this forester, Gurian by name, asked me, where do you get your names from? Well, I have to say, from my head. I looked at him for a while. I think I was explaining earlier that as you draw, as I draw, I should say, as I draw, I begin to get a sense of who the character is. And usually, at some point, I say usually, always at some point, the name begins to arrive. This is who I am. And maybe like the giant that I described earlier, it may be they don't have a name, or they do and I still haven't introduced it. So he has become known as the apple tree giant. Which is fine. And I have a feeling, I'll just go back to him now. Here he is. He will have a name. When we get to know him, he will have a name, but at the moment in the stories he's known as the apple tree giant who saved the village from drowning by picking up the houses, putting them on the hillside away from the flood. Rather appropriate at the moment. So I'll just explain as I'm doing this that I started my project without knowing it in 1977. I drew a map of a world that didn't yet exist. And so this is a new version of that same map, the realms of elsewhere, 32 countries. Once I'd drawn the map, being very dyslexic at the time, and one still is, I tried to write about it. I wrote about its gods. Didn't need a narrative, so that was okay. I wrote about its gods. I wrote about some mythology, but I couldn't go any further, so instead I started to paint it. That seemed very normal to me because I was drawing at the age of 12. And then I began, through circumstance, I moved to Norfolk in England, into an old lifeboat house, and my wife and I started sculpting him, first in stoneware and then in porcelain. And it was a really good way of making a living and also pursuing what I love to do. This is a porcelain character here, so very small. Pieces went all around the world. Lots of people collected the work, and I did that for many, many years, and became very well, I suppose you could say, became very well known for my unusual sculptures. And when I did a sculpture, like, let's say, Gurion here, if somebody said, can I have an elvish forester, I would have drawn him, a bit like this, but maybe not quite so detailed. And I would send that in the post. In the good old days when we used to send things in the post rather than email them, I'd send it in the post, and the collector would get the drawing and say, yes, please. They'd write me back, or they'd ring me on the landline. I want him, please make him like that. And I'd make him in porcelain. So I've got to understand the back of him, the side of him. What does he look like? It could take me, I don't know, a figure like him would take me about 4 days to make. Clay would be dried, porcelain eventually. Porcelain would be dried, and then once he was completely dry, he'd go in the kiln, put him in the kiln. He'd be fired usually overnight to a biscuit temperature, which is around about 800 degrees. He'd come out, and then I'd start painting him with special paints that take heat. And once they were on the surface, that would be glazed if I wanted it glazed, shiny, or if I was going to put gold on there, or something like that. Go back in the kiln, fired to 1300 degrees, so a lot higher. Come out again, and if there were glazes, like a tip there that would be glazed, maybe if you had a ring it would be glazed. I put gold on there, liquid gold. We've got some here. like a liquid gold. And they come in little pots. Very expensive for a little pot. And that would go in the kiln again and fire at only 740 degrees. It would come out. I think that firing, although it's low, is really dangerous because if you fire it too quickly, the gold or the lusters don't work. They are very, very expensive, and so you have to fire it very slowly. So a 780 degree firing would take around about 50 degrees an hour. So you can work that one out. It's 50 degrees an hour and it's 780. The glazed firing, much higher, would be far less because the sculptures, the work would already been fired, so you're not driving off any moisture. So a 1300 degree firing would probably take around about 8 hours. But this firing with lusters, you have to be very careful. Anyway, he'd be fired 3 times and then he'd be done. Jim Henson had a piece, thinking about it. Elton John had a piece. So famous people. So I did that until 1993, and then I became a storyteller, which is where I began my story a little while ago, where I was beginning to learn about narrative, protagonists, archetypes, and at some point or another, I stepped inside the story. Really important. In other words, I began to be inside the places where the story was taking part. It became an integral part of my journey as a storyteller. So if you were here at the beginning, I was talking about 1977, drawing a map of a world that I couldn't write about. So I sculpted it and painted it. Full circle, 2012. Been a storyteller by then for a very long time, 20 years almost, and I returned to the idea of writing about my world, but of course now it was different. I've been a storyteller, I've been a sculptor, I've been a painter. This world was more alive in my soul, if you like, and I began to write. And now, all this time later, it's become a 20-year legacy project, and this is the first book. There are 2 books printed, and this book is about to come out as a paperback to sell around the world, and this is great. You can find out more on my website, which is associated to my YouTube channel, and it's 9 books. 4 are written. I'm writing book 5 at the moment. 2 published, 3rd one to be published in the summer, and then book 4 early next year. So I'm slowly but surely sharing my world of the realms of elsewhere, and having an absolute... I had a lovely email this morning from a lady in America. She'd seen one of the live videos, and she said it just blew me away, and I felt so inspired. I felt like I was coming home. It was something that I felt like it was something I already knew. And you know, when somebody's really honest with you, really open, there's no agenda. To me, that's really moving. Really moving. It means a huge amount to me when I know that I've made a difference. Like the children last night telling stories, you can see that for an hour I'm making a difference. And if somebody has a piece of my artwork or a book, and they find themselves falling into the fantasy realm that I'm creating, and they like the narratives, and they like the bigger picture, and they enjoy the maps, well, that is pretty amazing. I find That's amazing. And it just feels completely uncontrived that I started all of this almost 50 years ago. 50 years ago, next year, 2027. So by 2032, all being well, keep my health, because I'm not a spring chicken anymore, 9 books will be published. Whoa. There. You coming together here. The sticks that he's collected. I asked him, this character, so what are you doing? And as he came to life, he kind of looked at me, he gave me this look that he's now got on his face. As if to say, yeah, I'll sit here, but I've got busy, I'm busy. And what are you busy with? And I imagined that he had to go down below. He was collecting wood for some of the old folk who couldn't do it for themselves anymore. He looks like that kind of character. That he knows a lot, but he's kind-hearted. So that's who he is, I think. Yeah, so that's Gurion, the Master Old Crane. The Master Old Crane, wood harvester for the Thelian forest, and it reaches into the 900. In other words, the forest that he works and the reaches, how far it reaches, he finds wood, he looks after the trees if they're sick, he probably communes with the birds and animals that live there, and he understands nature, and nature knows that and welcomes him in. And being an elvish sort that he is, he knows many things. Many things. Just going back to the explanation of creativity and finding different ways to create on the surface. I'm using the crayons, these oil-based crayons. I'm using tiny pens. So when you would come into my studio, they would get up close and personal to my sculptures. They'd buy a sculpture, buy an illustration, and then I'd get a letter from them or a phone call a year later, and they'd go, I've just noticed there's so many tiny things on your sculpture. I'm still looking at it. I still find new things. That's really important to me. That is amazing. How can that not be amazing? So, as I said, sometimes I hide things in my illustrations, and that's cool. But by the fact of doing small, I either just do lots and lots of small things like this, or I'll hide faces, or sometimes I put people's names. If somebody's commissioned something for me, I'll hide their name. In part of it, I might put it here, down on a shoe. It just kind of means I'm playing, really, but being very creative at the same time, hoping that it gives pleasure long, long, long after I've gone from this world. So that's what I do. And if you want to know more, just go to my website, or follow me here, or tell someone else about what I do. It's all cool. Yeah. He's coming on. He's looking quite good, really. These lives on TikTok and on here on YouTube get turned into little films, which is really nice. I like that. I can sometimes turn them into little audio tracks on my Patreon site, which is also really good. And it's on Patreon that I start to write. It's like a library on there. So I'm going to be writing about Gurion today and tomorrow. I'll put this film up, that I'm creating with you at the moment, out there. This will go on there, and I'll probably take a clip from this and try and begin to get to know Gurion's life. How on earth did he become a forester? Was his father or mother a forester? Did he get lost in the forest once, off playing, and found himself underneath a great big tree, surrounded by branches that had fallen off in a storm, and he gathered them up and taken them back. And when he got there, his mother stood at the door. Now, elvish women have got all kinds of magical ways of dealing with children who are of an unruly nature. She looked at him and she said, "So what have you been doing? Where have you been?" And he explained how he'd got lost. "Now, how did you get yourself to get lost in the first place?" "I was curious about the trees," he said. Well, you should have told me you were going. And what's that you've got? What have you brought half of the forest back with you?" "These branches," he said. "They wanted to be picked up by me." "How do you know that?" "They told me." And she gave him such a look. She gave him such a look. "They told you, did they?" "Father," she calls out. And her grandfather comes out. He was as old as you can imagine, and older than that as well. "Father," she says, "look at this." And father's there and grandfather's there. And they look at their boy, grandson, great-grandson. "See, it must be in the blood." And they laugh. And one of them says, not sure which, "Grandmother, great-grandmother, that is, she used to be a forester. She had a thing about wood, said it used to talk to her." The boy looked at them all, staring at him, laughing. "Well, they do," he said. "They talk to me." "In that case," and it was the father himself at the door, "in that case, Gurion, you've chosen your occupation. I shall send you to the forest school. You'll not teach you about trees, because you'll know it, but they'll teach you about the old ones, the trees that are here no more, but their roots, and what their roots knew, is still in the ground." By now, Gurion's eyes were shining bright. He was smiling deeply inside, for he now knew something. Life was about to change, and he was about to go to a school where he'll learn about trees. Life, indeed, was about to change for Gurion, Master Old Grain, Wood Forester, for Felden and its reaches in the lands of the 900. So there you are. Thank you for being here. I hope you've enjoyed. And as I say, I can make this a film here on YouTube. And yeah, thank you for your time. Enjoy your day.